Sorry, Dave. I thought I had control of it.
That's
Welcome back, everybody. Hello, all you Spurs fans. We're still in the midst of the summer window. Things might be heating up, actually, just as we got live. We're seeing some rumors with a Burnley defender, Maxine Esteve, also as well. Looks like Spurs are trying to at least wrap up or get an improved bid done by the end of the week for Mohamed Kudus. But we actually had something else that we would probably get stuck into today, maybe a bit about some players that Thomas Frank could have a new look at, fresh eyes on, players that could get a clean slate. We'll be talking about whether you think some of these guys even do deserve a clean slate at all and a fresh start under a new manager. We're looking at some of the younger players that are coming back. If you didn't notice already, the training camp, the preseason has already begun. We're seeing some of the fresh players that were out on loan, guys that potentially are the future of Tottenham Hotspur. They're nice and early in that Hotspur way training camp, and they are taking a look at what Thomas Frank is trying to instill, what sort of tactics he's trying to embed. I think at the minute they're actually just going through some tough sort of training and physical exercise. I think they're, looking very, very tired, it looked like, after one of the first sessions there. But we're going to see what that means and whether Thomas Frank is going to be given, some new leases of life on some of these players. And we'll talk as well about some of the transfer business, about whether you think we've gotten too early, in terms of our frustration. Are you a patient person? Are you just expecting everything to be done by the end of the window and you don't really care when it gets done? Or are you a person that feels like Spurs are already kind of on the back foot? Plenty of things to discuss, but maybe more of a mix of, things to look forward to in the beginning stages that we're already in preseason, and then as well as some transfer business to discuss in general. But good to see so many people in the house, joined by a regular panel of Sean, Sam, myself, and Dave here. Thanks to everybody that's followed us over from Sam's stream as well. Seeing plenty of people already in the chat. Daniel Field, Lord, multi-channel, Archer. We got the Alexes in the house. We have K32, Spurs, Graham. Good to see you, Graham. Tot Spurs, K32, and plenty more. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. As always, if you want to interrupt the show, you're certainly welcome to. If you want to throw in a super chat, we can get to your point or your question or wherever you want to get stuck into straight away. We'll also try to bring up your comments throughout the stream as we have this discussion. It is a weekly panel show that we try to run, and do smash the like button for us, please, as well. Eddie has come in here nice and early saying, well, damn, 15 months has flown by. Thanks for everything, lads. We can't be giving a clean slate to everyone. We know that this team isn't good enough and needs improvement. Well, that's one of the big questions for tonight, Eddie, is, who is deserving of a clean slate? Are there certain players that Thomas Frank shouldn't even dare to try to consider giving a clean slate to? That is one of the first ones that we'll be discussing tonight. So hopefully you enjoyed, Eddie, and thanks for the 15 months of very generous support, as well as an elite member. Alfred Oscarson, I'm seeing joining nice and late, as well as Martin Walton. I mean, probably a bit rude of me to say late because you're still relatively early, but good to see you all. And we'll get the show underway. We want to make the best use of these people's times who are giving it up at least once a week for us. Let's go first to you, Shawnee. We're looking at a long list of young and returning loanees. If you saw that, first training session at Hotspur Way video that they put out on the official channel, I saw the likes of Josh Keeley, Vuskovic, Ashley Phillips, George Abbott, Brian Hill, of all people, Solomon, Young Min Hook, so many guys there. Are you particularly maybe interested or excited to see maybe one of these guys break into the first team setup this season? Any one of those guys that you were kind of rooting for, when you watched that video, giving a fist pump to when you saw them show up at the Hotspur Way? Anybody that maybe is on the periphery of the squad, young, talented, but hasn't necessarily been given that chance yet? Anybody that you're excited by preseason?
Yeah, excited by the prospect of seeing. I'd like to see Jamie. I'm looking forward to seeing what Jamie Donnelly's got about him. I listen. I know that I have to keep the same energy in the pursuit of logic. I've said that I don't think that you can take too much from Manor Solomon's championship outperformance. He was very good in the championship. And so by that same logic, I shouldn't really be able to take anything from Jamie Donnelly's League One efforts. But at the same time, there's something about, for the same rationale, I can't necessarily justify why I've got a gut instinct that Matisse Tell is a good player, better than he showed. I'd say the same thing about Jamie Donnelly. I just think that I think he's the sort of guy that whatever level of obstacle you put in front of him, I think he's going to be able to handle it. I don't necessarily think he'll be at Tottenham by the end of the summer, but I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in the preseason, what we have, and then if we get to see him in a game or two, if he goes out to Korea and elsewhere, looking forward to that. Number two is Vuskovic. Really want to see what he's at,
Yeah,
because
he's mine.
he did some amazing things over in Belgium, and the physical stature of the guy, the confidence of the man. I just think that there's also this, like, there's a part of me that thinks that he's going to be like a secret weapon if used correctly, sparingly. If he does hang around, I think that you could sort of maybe take a look at him, the way that he's so aerially dominant offensively. Think about what Dan Burn did at
Yeah,
Newcastle,
wow.
placed him outside the box at the back post, and then they had this kind of arrangement under Eddie Howe where he would be the danger man, but he would start his run 4 yards outside the box. Impossible to mark that, because you can't put your best defensive header of the ball on a guy that's outside the box, so you have to let him have the march, right? And then if the guy who's taking the corner kick can then put it on whatever the pre-designated spot is, 8, 9 times out of 10, then if he can get there in time, then. And I think that Moscovic could be a real threat in that regard. I don't know, but I literally have no idea whether or not those levels are the right things to be judging them on. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of those sorts of criteria.
Yeah.
For others, not particularly.
Yeah.
Look, no disrespect to Manuel Solomon. I know he's done a good job, and this is only about his footballing criteria, nothing else about him. But I just think that if Sonny is now suggesting that he's staying, then for us to sign Kudus and someone else, there has to be someone in that forward effort, or maybe two, that leave. And I think that on that basis, if Sonny's decided he wants to give the Champions League one more crack, then I think that Solomon has to leave, and maybe Richarlison does. I know the question was about like loanies coming back. So for me, I think Manuel Solomon, for me, I'm happy to see what he's like, but at the same time, I still think we have to cash in on him if possible and move forward. And but in terms of the positives, I'm really looking forward to seeing Donnelly and Vescovic more than anyone else.
Those are kind of my two as well. And also, since Johnny is absent, it's probably a good time to get all of our Solomon digs in, while he's away, just for this show. But Sam, I mean, I think Sean's on the same boat as me. When I saw Vuskovic, I was pretty impressed by just how massive, the guy is. And I'm excited to see him, maybe being given that chance to break into the first team. I have high hopes for him. I would hope that he maybe doesn't have to be sent out on loan once again, that he actually could be kept around the squad, for some of the League Cup games, and maybe as just a backup if necessary for certain occasions. And then Jamie Donnelly, I think we're all, hoping to see at some point, kind of break into the first team. Whether it happens this season or not is, a big question. But anybody that you saw in kind of that first, training video, the guys that are making the returns, most of them were loanees, young players, any of them that you have dreams or aspirations for breaking into the first team this season?
I mean, yeah, you guys mentioned probably the main ones. They also took note of Ash Phillips. He obviously looked pretty tired after that run that they did. But I hope that he can use that to be like, oh crap, I'm like actually really unfit in comparison to some of these lads. I mean, he was the only one that was like laying down, at least that we saw, right? Like they made a conscious effort to like show that he was tired in the video. So I hope that he uses that to spur himself into action and kick on as a player, because he's massive as well. I mean, you look at him and he just looks like an absolute unit. Again, he's only like 18 or 19. So I'm excited for him. Again, as you said, Vuskovic, I feel like Vuskovic is waiting for his Eric Dyer versus West Ham debut goal. I can just see it, Vuskovic, and it won't be the same goal as Dyer, like rounding the keeper, but I can see everyone's hopes and dreams on this kid. Hopefully he turns out to be, worth the stocks that everyone's invested early on, even though probably only 5 people in the chat have seen him play. Donnelly also really exciting. One thing I know it's not necessarily about the young players coming back, but I mentioned it to you in the chat, Jack, like Dom Solanke, the guy is a monster. I mean, they all looked like they were finished, and he looked like he just got out the sea and was reclining on the sand, But I mean, I also saw Dave say in the comments, it's another boring day at Hotspur Way, but I don't know what he's talking about. We've made a really groundbreaking signing of Nick Stubbings, I believe his name is, from Brentford. Something that we actually all, as much as it is boring, I I feel like a lot of us should be fairly excited. I don't know anything about.
And they're making changes in the physio department as well, which is good.
Yeah, look, they got rid of 2 of the people that Scott Munn brought in, right? It was like one of the guys was called something Brett, and the other guy was called Davies. But I saw that the Brett went on holiday like halfway through the season in the midst of our injury crisis, and that did annoy me while I was sitting at my desk at work today thinking about the season, because I saw that Jed Spence posted his his markup of his rewind of the season, which was exciting to look back and see like the journey that we went on, because I forgot that he got the assist for Dom Solanke's goal against United. But yeah, overall, I'm just excited. I hope that Yang can I don't think that he'll find himself in the team, but I hope that he can beat the go out, have another good loan, and hopefully beat the nasty people in the fan base who, even if it is true, who only look at him as a opportunity signing for exposure rather than as a good player. But yeah, that's it really.
No, I mean, it's just kind of, it's not really time for debate, I think on these questions, just kind of, who you have dreams and aspirations for. And I have aspirations of one day reaching the fitness of Dominic Solanke. K32 saying best Spurs channel on YouTube. Thank you, Kieran. Very, very, very kind to us, Dave and I, especially over last season, and hopefully going on into this season under the Thomas Frank engine era. My friend, good to see you in the house with us. Dave, same question to you, man. Who do you have really, dreams for? Who do you have aspirations for? I think Sean sort of is on the same page as us with Jamie Donnelly. Anybody else, including Jamie Donnelly, that you have dreams of breaking into the first team or seeing break into the first team?
Do you know what, Jack? I'd like to see Josh Keeley be given an opportunity in preseason. He wasn't given one last season. Brandon Austin's there. Yeah, he done all right with his opportunity when it came around. And of course, we've got Kinski, who, of course, we spent money on to bring him in from Prague. But, neither of them, you would say, is an out-and-out number 2 behind Vicario. So for me, I think there's opportunity to look at someone like Keeley. I think he's the same age as Kinski. He's 22 years of age. I believe the club want to offer him a new contract and then ship him out on loan. But, after having that year's experience, I'm not being funny, but Kinski didn't exactly cover himself in glory or show that he's ready. So I think there could be an opportunity there for Josh Keeley. I think there's definitely an opportunity for 2 of the centre-backs there, whether it's Dorrington or Phillips or Fuskovic. I think when you look at Radu Dragusin, he's out with his ACL. He's probably not going to be ready for the start of the season. So you would like to think Thomas Frank, thinking logically, thinking there could be 50-odd games this year, would like to keep, 5 or 6 centre-backs around the club this season, because the likes of Vuskovic and that new guy, Takai, don't even have to be registered for the Premier League campaign. So I'd like to think, Vuskovic, I look at the size of him, he's an absolute beast. 3 loan spell, ripped it up in Croatia in the men's league at a young age. Same with the Polish league, then the Belgian league. He's one I really like the look of, and I think he could come in and probably hit the ground running. I think Dorrington will be loaned back out. I think he's good on the ball, but I think he needs to bulk up. You look at some of the other centre-back options, Vuskovic, 6'4", Phillips, 6'4", Takai, 6'4", Dorrington, not as tall, a bit on the side.
Sell him, Dave, right?
Maybe. I'm not quite so sure.
Sell him to Aberdeen. Get 5-6 million for him.
If it comes around, let's wait and see. But they might end up loaning him back out. George Abbott is actually one that's going to be interested to keep an eye on, actually. He had a phenomenal campaign last season at Notts County, much better than what anybody expected him to do. Not many people expected much out of him. He went there, he hit the ground running. I think, 8 goals, 9 assists or something like that.
Practically their best player.
The campaign. Practically their best player. Some screamers in there as well. And I believe he was the first in all the running there since he's came back, isn't he? Hasn't he been the quickest?
He also played in the minutes he had for Tottenham in the first team under Conte. He was pretty good as well. He didn't have many minutes, but when he did it, I thought he was very good.
Good point. So he was one of the first to break through. Yeah,
I'm just thinking with him, is he one that's maybe slipping under the radar a lot, that hasn't garnered the attention of others? But, he's super fit. He had a good loan spell. Could it be one where confidence is just taking him over and propel him ahead of others? That'd be an interesting one to keep an eye on with the likes of George Abbott. Look, when it comes to the likes of Alfie Devine, I think potentially you're going to see him being moved on and being sold. I don't think he's really developed into the player that many people thought he would when we first originally signed him. Gale will probably be sold on. Look, I maintain, I think Solomon will be looked at. I think when you look at the problems we had out wide last season, until we sign someone that comes in the door where Frank can go, yep, wash my hands and move him on, I think it'll be neglect if he doesn't look at someone like Solomon to see what he can offer, given the problems we had last season. But my main one is Jamie Donnelly. For me, I think last season what we lacked is someone with a bit of craft, a bit of guile. And I'm not talking about getting on the ball, beating players, but someone that can just ping the ball around the football pitch, put crosses or put balls in the box for players to get onto from different angles. That's something that Jamie Donnelly showed he possessed at under 21 level, and then also brought it out to Leyton Orient on loan with him. And he went out there and not only has a lot of young players that we've loaned out in years gone by really struggled, he excelled, absolutely excelled, becoming one of their main players in the team, helping drag them to a League One playoff, scoring that phenomenal goal against Man City. And I just think when you've got a talent like that, I think you've really got to give him the opportunity this year in one of them forward areas or even in the midfield to see what this guy can offer. So for me, I'm going to go with Vuskovic, Donnelly, but I keep an eye on Keeley and Abbott.
Quickly, what do we think of Martin Walton's comment saying, I'd keep Donnelly around till January window to help cover for Kulusevski? Sometimes I forget about that Kulusevski isn't actually going to be available in the first few games of the season. So does someone maybe like a Donnelly get an automatic chance because of that, that you would keep them around for this reason?
The interesting thing with some of these guys is they don't have to be registered in the Premier League squad, so they don't take up any numbers in that because, they're under 21. But also in the Champions League squad, some of them can still be put on the B list for that. So again, they're not taking up spots in the Champions League squad registration. And Jamie Donnelly is a perfect example of that, where you can actually make your squad bigger than what you're actually technically allowed by the rules, because you don't need to register the guy.
Yeah. Shem Tan saying feels like 14 years thanks to Spurs. Yeah, I think Dave and I probably make it even more longsome or even more arduous. But thanks, Shem. Thanks for all the support you've shown us. Probably plenty of the kebab orders that we've had have also maybe made it feel like 14 years as well after some of these Spurs games. Big up to you, Shem. And also Mr. Box Office says, if misery loves company, misery has company. Enough. Norwegian, I believe I can tell, Norwegian Crown, Norwegian Box Office impersonator, Shawnee. And
he's become a regular on. I think he originally found me via Saba, but he's been a regular on Football Inc. and on the Spurs Talk Show. And we were on the last show I was just on. I was talking about how miserable some of the Arsenal fans are around the fact that they. And how fortunate they are in that they're one of the best teams of all time. Like, I know we hate them, but like, facts are facts, right? One of the most successful teams of all time, and yet there's currency in misery as a YouTuber. If you're not quite the most successful, if you lose more than you succeed, which every team does, no matter who you support, then there's a lot of currency in predicting the losing lottery numbers, and we were speaking about that in the last show. So I think that's where Mr. Box Office is coming from with his super chat. But big up to you. I wanted to quickly just riff off of what Dave was saying there about Jamie Donnelly. So I've been saying on my channel on my uploads, and one of the problems with uploads is that you say things in the moment that you don't necessarily get the immediate reaction of a comment, right? That can correct you.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I think that maybe Mikey Moore needs to go out on loan, right? Because we're trying to find ways to find the space for Kudos and also for maybe someone else, whether that's Mikael Tadzi, whether that's Kolo Muani now that he's available for cheap 40 million quid, whether it's a Dusan Ballet, whatever. You got to find some space somewhere. And if Sonny's deciding that he's putting his heels in the sand and saying that he wants to stay, then it's going to be difficult. So you have to find room. So maybe you loan Mikey Moore out because he hasn't done anything. But so this is the thing, right? I didn't realize that forget about the value of the player. It's also the fact that if you loan him out, then that basically means that you'll jeopardize his ability to be a homegrown club trained player in 3 years' time. I didn't realize that because you have to be 3 years consecutive.
Yeah, in and around the academy.
In and around the club. Right? So Mikey Moore's not going anywhere.
Yeah. No, I think he'll be, and also Spurs, by this transfer window, we found out are desperate to have any sort of club-trained, homegrown players of any sort. You're right, Sean.
I would make the argument with Mikey Moore again. I think he is of a player that, if needs be, and you're badly stuck, he can offer you something. He can produce something. He's shown that, with some of his game time last season. I think Donnelly's the same. And technically, they're players that you can expand your squad, that you don't actually have to register in either the Premier League or the Champions League and still play them. And given Tottenham's history record, not just under Ange Postecoglou, even under Conte, the season he got, one of his seasons, he had a lot of academy kids on the bench because of injuries. With our injury record, I would argue that's where Tottenham have to be a little bit smart and say, right, number 26, 27, and 28 on the list are you three guys. You will be, because it's not like they're not going to play. If they're not needed for first team duties, you can send them to play with the under 21 still, get their game time that way. And then when the game time comes available for Tottenham, then introduce them. Do you know what I mean? I think we've got to be smarter now. And I think we should be looking at
I don't think you're
number 26, 27, 28.
Do you think you're going to learn anything more about Mikey Moore that you didn't already know from him playing in the under 21s?
No, but it's not only that he's playing with the under-21s, but he'll be up training with the senior team and stuff like that. And I do think, sticking around underneath the manager, knowing exactly what he wants, gives him a better shot of actually making the grade into the first team, especially when he's in front of the manager's eyes week in, week out, rather than out on loan. How many players have we sent out on loan that have actually come back to Tottenham and actually got in under a manager? And the reason why they're not
on that basis,
they're not under their eyes.
Will he get more minutes this season than last season, Sean, or do you expect him to get even fewer minutes?
I think this is where the conundrum is for me, is that when you look at the squad, right? I hear the point. I forgot the point that more than just about the current situation, but in years to come, if you want to have Mikey Moore as a club trained player for Europa Leagues in season 28, 29, 29, 30, etc., then he's going to need to be one of those. You can't then send him out on loan because then that will break up his 3-year period, right? So that's the biggest thing for me. Not so much his minutes next season, because I think that if Tottenham are looking to bring in Mohamed Kudus and somebody else, and then you have players like Richarlison that are cop-blocking essentially the opportunities for the club because they don't want to leave. And to a degree, you could make the same argument, although not through the same lens of cop blocking, but for Sonny. Then how do you make room in the forward line for more players coming in if you already have 9, 10 players? You've already got Odebear, you've already got Mikey Moore, you've got Johnson, you have Richarlison, you have Solanke, you have Sonny, Tell, Maddison, Decky. I'm sure there's someone else I'm forgetting about. And then that's 10. And then there's Kudus. And if Kudus does come in, that's 11. And then you want to bring somebody else in as well, like one of the umpteen names that we're linked with, that'll be 12. You have to get the number down to 8. You have to get it down to like maximum 9. So 3 have to go out. But if Sonny's saying, I'm not leaving, if Richarlison's saying, you can push me, but I'm not going to go, I'm not going, then where is it that you find the space? And so you pivot to people like, if it's not Mikey Moore, because you need for him to spend 3 years between the age of 14 or whatever it is, 16 and 21 as entirely consistently at the club to be able to qualify him for club train status in 3 years' time when he's above that age, then where else do you find that wiggle room? You can't, are you going to loan Odebear out? Because you're taking a long-term view on Mikey Moore? That seems like you spent 35 million quid on Odebear. Is that what we're really doing? Or are you going to sell Johnson? You have to find 3 spots in that forward line. And I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it and bring in 2 new players. I think it's a problem.
I think off the back of, World Cup is off the back of this season, isn't it? If I'm correct, am I correct? The World Cup's off the back of this season?
Yeah.
Which means I think Richarlison won't hang around. If he's going to be told there's no game time for him, World Cup year, he's not going to hang around. He will look to get a move. So I actually think in that regard, I think Tottenham actually, have the upper hand here where they can turn around to some of them players and say, well, World Cup year, you won't get selected if you're hanging around here not playing, and we're not going to play you. So go and get yourself a move. So I think Tottenham do have an upper hand in that regard. But there also has to be an understanding that some of them young players, they didn't step up last season, when we needed them on a consistent basis. And that's our big problem in the forward area. So if we need to make room, to bring in more experienced players, but then, we shouldn't be adverse to loaning out the likes of Matisse Tell, the likes of Wilson Odebear. If we're bringing in better options ahead of him, we shouldn't be adverse to it.
Well, you just paid 40 million for Tell, and you're going to loan him out immediately.
Well, I don't. If we can bring in better options, I don't understand why we can't. They're still of the right age to be able to go out on loan. And to be honest with you, they're also not clinical enough for what we need to make us even better going forward next season. So, I wouldn't be adverse to it. We've got options.
For me, sorry, the name that I forgot off that list of 12 was Solomon. I forgot all about him, and he's the one that has to go. He's the guy that has to go. But
no, 100%.
To me, I think he has to go. I think there's not even an argument there. But at the same time, if you're making the argument that Solomon has smashed it in the Championship, but that's not enough of a reason to keep him because it's the Championship, which is the argument that I have professed. It's not necessarily something everyone has to agree with, but I think that the Championship doesn't give you a good enough indication. Neither does, by the way, pre-season friendlies that are essentially glorified fitness tests.
What if we just loaned him out to prove his fitness, though?
Sorry?
What if we just loaned him out to prove his fitness?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't. If you loan him out for the season, it's the immediate problem solved, but it also doesn't mean we're getting any money in for him. So it's not a problem with like Solomon the player. It's just we have 12 players in our squad that are currently strikers or forwards that would all consider themselves first team players, and yet we know that last season half of our problems were because we couldn't convert enough chances from the 12 that we have or from the 10 that we had. And if the argument that's been put forward to me is that you can't loan out Mikey Moore because that will break up the 3-year period that you need him to have spent in the club's ranks from the age of X to Y to be a future club trained player. Therefore, you can't loan him out. If that is correct, and I think it is from what I've read, then he was one of the ones that I say loan him out. And then Jamie Donnelly's another. Because if you're making the argument that Solomon hasn't done enough, even though he smashed it at Championship, how can you possibly make the argument that Jamie Donnelly has when he smashed it at a league lower than that? So, but at the same time, if the same argument exists with Jamie Donnelly, that in order for you to qualify for a future club trained player, you have to have spent X amount of time consistently. As far as I understand it, it has to be consistent time.
Between 15 and 21, though, surely Mikey Moore definitely has that. He's been at the club all his life, same as Jamie Donnelly. So they're definitely,
So it's not 3 years consistent. It's just 3 years within that 6-year period.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Oh, in that case, then okay. Well, then if that's the case, then I'm talking absolute nonsense.
I mean, I don't know. I think like it is worth considering, and also I think Rain Man's comment was kind of interesting of just the idea of, with a lot of these talented players, is it a good idea just to have them, sort of be at the club at 18, 19, get loaned out at 20, and then sort of bring them back around 21, 22 years of age to see if they are ready for that first team then? I just wonder if that's a decent sort of, you don't apply that to everyone, but if that's not a bad sort of, I don't know, principle to go by with some of these young players. Is that realistic? If we were to sort of have majority of these guys stick around that are from the academy till about 19, 20 years of age, and then you loan them out then to get those real minutes, away from the club?
You're basically applying the same rule for everybody there, and you can't. It was like basically when they just said to the academy players, we have a wage structure. You're all going to be on the same wage, and it's whoever wants it more. So you're saying to me, like, I'm more talented than this guy. I've got way more talent in my baby finger than him, but he's going to be paid the same as me. You can't apply one. Everyone develops at different rates. Everyone develops at different times, and I think that's something that the club will have to figure out individually. You can't just apply one rule for everybody in this situation.
Yeah. Oscarson saying, as a Champions League team, we should let a few of the youth players have some minutes there. The others will end up like all the other ones who had a career like Tanganga at Spurs. Does anyone believe in that? Having, youngsters being kept around to get opportunities here and there in the Champions League, or is that too big of a competition?
No, I don't. Look, Champions League is going to be a step up in quality. Like, we're not going to get away with playing, as many youngsters as maybe we did together in one pitch, in the Europa League. You might see one or two dotted here or there, depending on, the quality of the opponent. But look, I make the case. I would stretch it to a 28-man squad and say to 3 youngsters, you're 27, 28, or 26, 27, and 28. We'll keep you around, keep you developing nicely over the course of the season. And if game time arrives, it arrives.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Good to see plenty of people in here, though. Jason Bell has joined us. Looks like Lazy 8 has joined us. Holly's Hotspurs has joined us. Plenty of people in the house. Do smash the like button if you are already in here, please, everybody. Shawnee Maddox, member for 22 months, saying, I hate this phase of new manager comes in and gives everyone a third chance. But given the talented youngsters and the injuries, I really want to see players take this opportunity. Well, Sean's doing my hosting for me here. This was one of our questions that we should probably bring up to you guys. Every new manager brings a clean slate. Who do you think could be a surprise, under Thomas Frank? Who's someone that we might think is perhaps out the door, or someone who, I don't know, maybe hasn't been looked at before, even a young player that maybe will be used as a key player under Thomas Frank. Maybe someone that's been misused, written off for whatever reason. Could Basuma, Richarlison make a comeback? A Brian Hill, maybe, or maybe some of the younger players like we've mentioned, a George Abbott, a Jamie Donnelly. Anybody that we think Thomas Frank could surprise us with, and bringing back, into the squad that maybe wasn't used under Ange Postecoglou.
Or a player that
was,
maybe didn't perform under Postecoglou that you think will hit it under Frank, maybe even.
Yeah. Sam, you wanted to come in?
I was surprised when I read that apparently that Frank that we told Basuma that he was looking to be sold. I mean, if you'd asked me this before Frank was announced, I'd have said 100%, get him gone. But I was a little bit surprised to see that Frank wasn't interested in seeing what he can do, because we all know that on his day, Basuma is a great midfielder. It's just that his day was so few and far between. Obviously, towards the end, he actually put in, quite a few consistent games towards the end of the season in the Europa League as well. But you mentioned Richarlison as well, and I wonder if Frank actually might be interested in keeping Richarlison if they think that they can manage his minutes enough so he's still getting in there. Obviously, as you say, it's a World Cup year, so if he's keen on actually getting starting minutes, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think that I'd be interested to see how Frank deploys him, because I feel like Richarlison, he's not the kind of striker I feel these days that you would want to run in behind, mostly because you worry that as soon as he starts to go, something on his body's going to fall off. But with Richarlison, I feel like his heading ability is actually, probably up there in the Premier League. I feel like if you put a ball in his vicinity, he will get his head on it. Whether it goes towards goal or not, I think that's a different question. But I think the utilization of the wing backs getting wider rather than playing attacking mid and actually putting crosses in, which, as I said, I think will also suit Dom Solanke, because he won't have to play the sort of faux Harry Kane role, which he just doesn't have the passing ability to do, unfortunately. Dom might actually get chances, and I think the same is true with Richarlison. And maybe in some of the European games, if Dom's played a lot, or if we bring someone else in that's played a lot, Richarlison will get time. And I can see him coming off the bench in a lot of games, because as we see, Solanke runs himself into the ground for the team. So, you would want to, even if he is good to keep going, Solanke, you would want to at least try and manage his minutes. And Richarlison could be a solid player to do that with. There aren't really any other players in the team for me that I think were necessarily leaving that should be given another chance. I mean, a lot of the players that potentially are leaving or staying is still kind of up in the air, and we haven't really got any real indication on who is going to go. You hear murmurs here and there, but you don't know the credibility of the sources, and so it'll be interesting to see who ends up staying. I know that we've mentioned Solomon, and I agree with Sean's point about if you're going to say that it doesn't count for Solomon in the Championship, then you shouldn't count it for other players. But obviously, the only reverse thing that I would say about that is there have been players that have made that step up in the past. It's not everyone, of course, but there are players out there, and if they think that Solomon is good enough to be one of those players that can transfer his form from the Championship, at least in part, into the Premier League, then I wouldn't be against having him as an option.
Does anyone get annoyed by the fact that some people could be given that third opportunity, like Sean is alluding to? You never know. Basuma could all of a sudden, be given a new lease of life that maybe he doesn't deserve. Someone like I mentioned earlier, like a Brian Hill, all of a sudden, gets a look in, that feels like, his story has already been written, with Tottenham Hotspur. I know Sean's mentioned Solomon a few times. Maybe all of a sudden Thomas Frank does end up, giving Solomon that chance. Does anyone get annoyed by the fact that there is maybe this new lease of life that's given to some of these players with a new manager?
Well, what I would say, Jack, is I don't hate any of the potential quality of any of the players that we are considering letting go. There's nobody in the team that I look at and go, they're just awful players. They're just awful. No good. Solomon, when he's fit and he's firing, I think there's something in him that is worth having a look at. 100%. Bissouma at his best, when he's paying attention and the bozo gene is out of his head and he's concentrating, I think the guy is it's not that long ago. He was one of the best sort of eights in the game in Brighton, right?
And he turned up at the end. I know what you're trying to say.
And he turned up at the end. I just think that Tottenham need to move into a new direction, and I think that if Thomas Frank decides that Solomon is the guy that he wants, I'll get behind it. I will get behind it. But if it's because there's a lean from the club around spend is tight or whatever, I can't get behind that. So and we'll never know as fans. Of course, the manager's never going to come out and say, "I wanted someone else, but the money wasn't there." So we have to lean into whatever we think on that. And I will lean into the idea that if that's the case, it's because Tottenham and Daniel Levy are being frugal in a time when you can't. As I said before, I've always understood that as much as it pissed a lot of fans off, that at the time when we got to the Champions League final and then everyone says that was the time to kick on, unfortunately, there were other conditions, there were other environmental factors regarding debt, regarding the stadium. And I've always said it was the worst thing that Tottenham Hotspur could ever happen. The worst thing that could ever happen to Tottenham Hotspur was getting to the final of the Champions League when we did and then not winning it. It was just like a perfect storm of uncomfortable, positives and negatives in terms of ambition. What I would say though, putting aside those guys, and I stand by the idea that I don't think there's any bad players that are leaving the club. On their day, they're all capable. I do think, as much as I would consider this to be not what I want, there's two players that I actually think could majorly benefit from a Thomas Frank version of the football that we're going to see in comparison to Ange Postecoglou's. I think Sonny, thing for him, I think it's the perfect way to sunset his career, because I think in all likelihood, he's not going to be a part of a team that can go and do any better than we did at the end of last season. And so given the kind of romanticism of the environment of him, the last moment in his 10-year career was him lifting the trophy. That to me is the perfect way to sunset it. However, if he has put his heels in the sand and says, I want to stay and have a crack, if he is happy to abdicate the throne of captaincy, so I don't think he's a good captain, and if he is also happy to play 25 minutes here, 25 minutes there, to not be starting every game, to be a sort of a baton conduit, someone who hands the baton on to Matisse Tell, someone that's playing that role of coach, of mentor, and also, when necessary, when called upon, to play 25 minutes per game, or to not play at all in some games, but to be ready for a Champions League game on a Tuesday, in a system where our football is requiring not the authenticity of wing forwards that hug the touchline, but to go into an inside forward role, either in a 2-man in a back three or a 3-man in a 4-2-3-1 or whatever, where he is not asked to hug touchlines, but he's asked to do what he did 6 years ago as an inside forward, where Tottenham play a slightly deeper line where we can pivot and counter. I actually think under those environments, you still have one of the best players in our squad that used specifically in that environment could also be a liberating concept for him, and that he actually might show his best version of himself that we've seen since Kane left. So even though I don't want him, I'd rather he left and we have that money, 30, 40 million, to go and put towards someone younger and go again. If he does stay, I genuinely don't think it would be naturally and necessarily horrendous. I think used correctly, and as long as he's okay with those environmental conditions, I think he could have the best season he's had for a few years.
Yeah, I kind of agree with your point, with what also the other Sean was mentioning about, I get annoyed by, some of these guys being given that third chance or fourth chance. But it is a bit different to what it used to be. Maybe we're just kind of comparing just terrible times versus, maybe slightly better times. But, it was annoying when you would see Davinson Sanchez, be given, a new 3 months, to potentially wow the manager, or someone like a Serge Aurier or a Matt Doherty, like guys that pretty much the majority of the fan base really just didn't rate and felt like just needed to go out the door. But they would be given, that little bit of time or that slightly, extended leash to an extent, because it's a new manager and they all have to get a look in. It feels a bit different now where, like you're mentioning, almost every player in the squad on their day can be a very good player, or maybe even for another club, certainly could be, a good player for a different club.
There's
They
no
have
Deadwood,
decent
is there,
quality
Jack?
in them. Yeah.
Like 2 years ago, mate, we was like, this club is full of Deadwood that we have to get rid of. There's very little Deadwood. Now we've got like players that are not necessarily quite correct, not at their best, but they've all that like it wasn't that long ago that we had the Matt Dohertys, the Eric Dyers, there was loads of players in our squad that everyone universally was generally this guy. Come on, we're trying to do this. This guy's not at that level right now. You look at the best versions of the people that we have, and most of them on their day are more than capable. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bunch of shit flavored lollipops, that were, just sort of getting out the club anymore. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, to you, Dave, I mean, do you agree with Sean Maddox that you get a bit annoyed by people being given a third or a fourth chance, or are you kind of content with the fact that some guys that maybe we wouldn't expect might be given a new lease on life, with a Thomas Frank, maybe a Basuma, for example?
Well, look, somehow Ben Davies continues to break that mold. He continues to get chance after chance. But, that's one thing I respect the Postecoglou. He got rid of a lot of the riffraff, your Sanchez's, your Dyers, people like that. Fair play to him. But I think Sean actually makes a valid point. Like, there's no player you look at and go, he's fucking utterly useless, get him out of this football club. Like, there's a lot of players you look at and go, if developed right, great potential, he could be this, he could be that. But I think that's where our sort of problem lied last season, was that sort of potential, but not really having, the real deal on the football pitch, more than enough occasions to be able to put points on the board. But look, one player I think would actually have a bit of a resurgence. So I think, done well in Europa League final, stepping up, putting that ball in the box. But in general, I think a lot of people are underwhelmed by his season. It's actually Papa Matasar. I think he's just a player that's waiting to break out. I think with Thomas Frank and his analytical approach and stuff, I have no doubt he'll have coaches in his ear saying, if you can improve on this, if you can improve this metric here, and I think ultimately they will get the focus on Papa Matasar, get the focus on the improvements where he needs to improve his game. And I think once he makes that improvement, I think you've got a player that is just waiting to, explode. Because when I look at Papa Matasar, what I really like about him is, first of all, he's very, very humble. He seems like a very quiet fella, just wants to get on with his business. But he gets around, turns over ball. He's very unselfish. A lot of the forward players would love a player like him who just wants to get around, turn ball over, and do a lot of the running. But also going forward, I don't think he gets enough credit. He poses a goal threat from midfield, something we've been screaming out for years. And I just think with the right areas improvement identified for Papa Matasar, I think he's a player that can really transform that midfield for us. Because in midfield, we are very lightweight. A lot of the game, it's sort of end to end, which shows you've got a problem in your midfield. They can't stem the flow. They can't, they can't either keep the ball in their half or, they can't stop it coming onto our back line. So for me, we have a huge problem in there. And I just think Papa Matasar is one that could potentially solve that if he makes the developments needed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know anyone apart from Richarlison that I would be really. I think Richarlison is probably the one I'm most keen on potentially be given that last and final chance, whether he deserves it or not. But I just wonder if Spurs are going to be even looking for another striker at all this summer to compete with Solanke. I wonder if he is going to be given that one last and final opportunity, the likes of Richarlison, with a new clean slate. We can probably now just sort of transition towards, maybe something that happened on the fan show yesterday, guys. We were talking a lot about, the lack of transfer business. There was a bit of a divide in the Spurs fan base as well as people in the chat. Some people are very patient, saying, come on, you can't already be complaining, with the lack of business. It'll eventually get done. Others like myself and Dave are getting a little bit worried by maybe the lack of sort of a transfer business. So let's maybe talk about what sort of Thomas Frank's maybe remit could be, at the club. With the amount of young players that we have around the club, what is Frank's remit or expectation, this season? Is it prioritizing long-term, squad development of some of these young players, or is it about immediate impact regardless of how the transfer market plays out? Because our worry is that he's kind of being given a very similar hand to deal with, like Ange Postecoglou. Like, he'll have a lot of young players that he has to sort of, give opportunities to, but then at the same time, he's expected to win a trophy and push very high up in the league. So what are maybe Thomas Frank's expectations going into this season? Is it more about developing this young squad, or is it about, finishing as high up in the league and pushing for trophies? Go to you again, Sean.
I think, Jack, it's a really interesting question, mate. I think that the fan base will probably there's going to be half a fan base that are going to be unhappy regardless. I think that that's the way we are. People like to, present their arguments and then sort of manipulate the environment to kind of to always sort of half the fan base always wants to lean towards like we could be doing better for whatever reason. I think the right level of expectation is, if I'm entirely honest, if we can qualify out of the Champions League group, I think that's a tick, given where we are, given what he's got to work with. Obviously, we need to know. It's too early to judge the squad. We have to wait until September the 1st. But by that point, we'll have already done the PSG game, and the season will be 3 or 4 games in. So you need to see a little bit more coming in the next couple of weeks to give Thomas Frank the best chance to work with the bulk of his squad. And get them prepared for like the various different options that he's obviously someone, him and Colcutt, etc. They're going to want to to organise in a certain way. I would say personally for me that if he qualifies for the Champions League by right, that's something that is a massive tick. It's above expectations. I think somewhere between 6th and 8th is probably, maybe 6th and 9th at a push is at the bottom end acceptable, at the top end a pretty good season for where we're at, for what we're looking for. But that's not the way the Tottenham fan base works, mate. I don't expect
the board expectations are different from the fan expectations often.
Yeah, of course they are. Yeah, I think if you've just won a trophy, going back to back on a trophy, how many teams in the history of English football have won a trophy 2 years running outside of the very best and biggest clubs in form at the moment? Like very, very few. Very, very few. So we've just won a trophy. Now that set that expectation, I'm interested to know, given the parallel conversation of how bad we were in the league, what it is that is now the new norm in the eyes of the expectations of the fans. When we got to the Champions League final and when we lost, we finished 4th that year. So the fans were used to Premier League dominance and an outside overperformance externally in the Champions League. That was then the sort of new baseline. Since then, I think the expectations have been sort of gradually coming down. I'm really curious to see how the fan base reacts to, let's say, 2 quarterfinals in the domestic cups, a last 16 in the Champions League, and a 7th in the Premier League. That, to me, just as a blanket statement, would be half the course of my expectations, and I would love to see what the reaction is to the fans if we were to do that. No trophy, but decent cup runs in all competitions relative to where we're at, and a significant improvement relative to last year in the league, but still a little bit par for the course for Tottenham's general last 15-year history. I'd like to know how that would be received. I think that's fair for a first season, but I think there'll be some fans that will say that's really good, and I think there'll be a lot of fans that will say that's not acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it's going to be a bit of both for the fans as well as the board. I think they want him to finish much higher up in the Premier League, but then at the same time, there's a very young group of players that do need to be developed. He has so many to pick from that they're probably expecting him to try to incorporate them in at the same time. It's a tough ask. It's a tough remit to
really
try to do
ask.
A lot better than Ange. Yeah.
I think the way I look at it, right, I have my expectations. I would prefer to use the Europa League to try and kick on. But at the end of the day, that can only be done in the transfer market, by bringing in a certain caliber of players. So to be honest with you, I'm going to make up my own remit for Frank, judging on what transfer window we've had. If we've had a poor enough transfer window, I've only really brought in some youngsters that kicking on to develop, then I have to give him time. I can't expect him to go out and conquer all of Europe and conquer all of England if he's been given that squad. I can't expect that of him. So for me, I think I'd have to give him time.
You can't wait there, Dave. For the purposes of the conversation, you have to go on where we're at right now.
Need your decision
I put my line in the sand. My line in the sand is 2 quarterfinals in the domestics, a qualification out of the group stage, out of the league in the Champions League, but not much more than that, and a 7th place in the league. That, to me, anything more than that is a good year. Anything less than that is a bad year. That's my. And I don't know. I hear you about the transfer market, but we don't know. We can't know yet. So for the purposes of the conversation, are you more optimistic or less demanding than that?
To be honest with you, I sort of feel sorry for Frank. I do feel like he's been set up to fail already with some of the other clubs already getting a lot of the marquee signings in early before preseason, giving them a chance to embed, get up to speed, gel with players, etc. I already feel like we put Frank behind the 8 ball. But being honest, I want to kick on from the Europa League. I want to go on and claim another trophy. I don't care what way that comes, whether it's one of the domestics, the Premier League, or the Champions League. It's probably not going to be one of them. So I would like to go and target a domestic trophy. Obviously, I would like to finish much higher up the league again. It's much more exciting winning games than it is losing games week in, week out. I'm not like, before I would have been of the opinion I would have made the trade-off, but actually sitting in the reality, not sure I would make that trade-off again. I don't like it. So for me, I would like to target one of the domestic cups while also trying to climb up the league. And like you said, get into the knockout stages of the Champions League, I think would be brilliant for Tottenham Hotspur, considering it's our first year back in there, given the young squad and stuff like that. But I do want to kick on, win a trophy, because at the end of the day, whether people like Ange Postecoglou or not and agree with what he done or not, he delivered a trophy. So that's now the expectation of the next guy off the right. He stands on Postecoglou's shoulders. So and the idea of making that change was to build on from what we've achieved, not reset and rebuild. So for me, where I'm at, I really want to kick on and go and target more trophies. That's why I have a demand on them this transfer window to try and get in the place to help Frank to be able to kick on and do that. Because the reality is, I know fans, sort of like are okay with just kicking on in the league. But I do fear at the end of the season, many people go, we're not in a cup final. We haven't won anything. It's not as fun as maybe I thought originally. So I think basically what's happening is it's going to flip. I think people like me would have said, look, don't really care about the league this year. I just want to go and win a trophy. I'm sick of league standings and stuff like that. Now it's flipped where I'm like, you do got to prioritize the league alongside trying to win a cup. But I also think those people who now said league position matters, I think we'll also pivot at the end of next season and go, right, no, we've got to kick on. We've got to try and do both. And which would be a good thing, because then eventually you get loads of people on the same page where it's like we've got to compete on all four fronts, which will be good. But as it stands, I want to kick on, Sean. But I'm going to be fair.
Kick on. So if you know that the Champions League is a tall order, you say qualification out, but like losing in the playoffs, losing in the last 16s, fair enough, whatever, like something like that.
But if he's a great coach, he'll be able to navigate that, right?
Yeah, but in season one, right? You're comparing him to Ange, who did nothing in season one. Season two,
finished fifth in the Premier League.
Yeah, okay, he did, right?
I'd say it's not when people are moaning about finishing.
No, sorry, I'm not saying it's nothing. Sorry, I mean in terms of the cups, right? So if you're saying that the cup is the priority for you, a trophy is the priority for you, then in order for that to have happened, whether you believe the narrative that there was a deprioritization or otherwise, I think there was a deprioritization of something. I think it was his philosophy personally, but at the end of the day, that we finished 17th. So is a Carabao Cup and 14th in the league a better season then than what Ange achieved, given that it's probably more difficult to win the Carabao Cup on paper than it is to win the Europa League, despite the fact the Europa League comes in more gravitas?
No, it wouldn't be a better season. It'd be a similar season. At the end of the day, winning a trophy is a happy season. That's all I care about.
Yeah, I think you look back on...
You look at the best players that leave Tottenham. They don't care about league position, and never have done. They always speak about, I want to win trophies. Trophies matter to people in sports, and I'm one of them.
So does the league position there.
Yeah, but,
the league position
people
is
that celebrate
more
fifth, you don't really get a trophy or a medal for that.
If you're trying to get players,
no one remembers league positions. Everyone remembers trophies.
And also, when you've had these conversations before, Sean, with some people that are a bit older than me that were around watching Spurs in the 90s, and they would say, "Oh, I'd trade for those days, any day, finishing lower in the league as long as we won the occasional FA Cup or some sort of trophy in there," right? So a lot of people did feel like winning a trophy every now and again was a lot better than league finish.
100%, but I'm saying that if we think that the finishing 17th is not a factor when players that are going to take you to the next level are considering coming to Tottenham, if you think that those things don't matter, then I would massively disagree with you. I think that winning the Europa League
doesn't matter to players.
But there is a narrative that has been spun by the media, whether we like it or not, whether it's real or not. And the media controls the discourse for so many people, for fans, for players, because they don't have the people that don't watch Tottenham inside and out and that just dial in occasionally have heard that Tottenham backdoored Johnson their way into the Champions League. Just like Brennan Johnson wasn't a superstar player, but he got 23 goals and assists last year. Everyone says, well, on that basis, shouldn't he be valued more than Anthony Elanga? People that are paying attention, no chance, because he doesn't do anything like what Elanga does, doesn't do anything like what Kudus does, doesn't do anything like what Mbumo does, although he scored as many goals, right? But the reason why is because those that are paying attention say he doesn't do anything else. He doesn't work hard enough, right? He was a byproduct recipient of the value of players like of the sacrificial lamb efforts of players like Dominic Solanke. So the people that are paying attention see that. People that aren't listen to the media. And the media were telling everybody that Tottenham Hotspur are a 17th league finish club who got lucky in qualifying for the Champions League. And so when Tottenham go to try to sign players this summer and say, we're a Champions League team, they're not aware of anything other than, yeah, but you're only there through luck because you backdoored it. Your 17th league finish is more of that's your bread and butter. And that is something that is more true than a one-off entry into the Champions League because of a fortuitous environment. Whether that's true or not, whether that's debatable, in my opinion, but the reality is that's the media spin. People like Richard Keys, people like Andy Gray, people like TalkSport, people like Sky Sports, they all went with the narrative that Tottenham shouldn't be in the Champions League because the Europa League had a different level of competitive imbalance because they didn't have the same drop-down effect from the Champions League. And that's the narrative that some random player who plays for Milan or some random player in Bruges or some random player in Morocco or wherever else, that they're hearing that narrative rather than Tottenham are a Champions League team and therefore should be able to attract Champions League quality quality players.
I don't think fans really care that much about that narrative, though, to be honest, which is, I think, where the question kind of started. I do want to just bookmark this, though, and come right back to it. But let's get to Silver Surfer, Spilver, Spurfer. And I think this was something Dave mentioned from before about Pop Montasar. And it seems like that's why you came in, with the conversation about the clean slate, new lease of life, on a player. And he was saying everyone was happy to sing Johnson, ole, ole, for that goal that he kind of scored. But few sang Sarr's song when he actually provided us the cross that won the final. Underrated. I think Pop Montasar was, in my opinion, I didn't have the best of seasons last season, but I was kind of surprised how, he was criticized, quite heavily for the most part. I think he is a guy that we forget, is still quite young. A lot of people made that excuse for Johnson and other players saying, oh, well, he's still only a kid. I think Pop Montasar is still very young. Lucas Bergvall was given a lot more praise than Sarr last season, even though Sarr had 7-8 more goal contributions than Lucas Bergvall did. I think Sarr was maybe overly criticized last season, in my opinion, and still has a lot of development to go. But you still think about, that debut that he had in the Champions League next to Oliver Skip, under Conte in that 3-4-3. He absolutely bossed the midfield. Pop Montasar is, I think, a great midfielder. I think he is really underrated, to be honest. And I kind of agree. Dave, he wasn't really given a ton of praise for that cross. And in that in that Europa League final, he was like Bentancur and Basuma. I mean, the guy just ran his lungs out. He was all over the pitch.
He was outstanding, but every team needs a player like that, the unsung hero, someone that doesn't maybe get the praise, until maybe later on in the season. I think Papa Montasar's biggest problem last season was the consistency. He didn't produce it on a consistent basis. He had a lot of standout moments, but didn't always, there was a lot of games in there where people found him underwhelming and in possession and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the guy's a big-time player. He stepped up in big games. Man City in the Cup scored a banger. In Europa League group stages, he scored a couple of goals. In the final, stepped up, delivered that ball into the box after winning it. What I noticed about Papa Montasar and where he doesn't get enough praise is he is a big game player. You go back and look at a lot of Tottenham's big games last year, he stepped up.
Yeah, but his passing is horrendous at times, though, Dave.
Last season, he definitely had some games where I think he gave the ball away in bad areas and then also was a bit anonymous. But at the same time, his first season, Ange Postecoglou, Sean, plenty of people put him down as like one of the best midfielders in the team. Like, I think they called him Mr. Consistent, or at least to some degree.
I think the guy's got the most potential. I'd argue that his ceiling, I hate the word ceiling, but I'd argue his ceiling is as scalable as Lucas Bergvall. But the problem is he's got, for me, he has this unique value that is like there's no player that people go, well, where do you park him? What position is he? Who is he comparable to? I'm not sure what, I think he's got very unique specificities of his skill set, similar to Decky.
He's your traditional box to box. He can do it all. He's your box to box.
But if he could, like, if his legs were working as fast as they do, and he can cover as much ground, his ability to intercept, his brain is sharp, his ability to read the game is second to none. But unfortunately, when he carries the ball forward, he could be the catalyst for so much. But unfortunately, his final delivery, it's poor. It's all too frequently.
I think that's harsh. And the reason why I say that is you go back to the San Siro when him and Skip played in midfield that night. The reason why Sarr's still here and Skip isn't is because Sarr showed an unbelievable passing range that night. Last season, he put some unbelievable passes as well over the top for Sonny to get on the end of and stuff. Don't get me wrong. I do agree that there were games in midfield at times where he did give away possession an awful lot. But what I mean
it's not just games, mate.
He does have it in his locker. And this is one of the areas where I think if he makes a remarked improvement, I think you got one hell of a player.
That's what I mean. He has a ceiling. If he can improve on that one area of his game, the final delivery, when he's running at pace, when he's intercepted the ball and he's made that decision and he goes, love it. But it's just that when he does that under the Ange system, when everyone bombs forward and then he gives away a weak pass and we get transitioned on, the amount of times that it was his unnecessary mistake, unforced error that led to a transition that created.
No one highlights that with Bergvall.
Different type of player.
3 or 4 goals last year doing that. No one
highlights
it.
Bergvall makes mistakes in defense. Pape Sarr makes mistakes in offense that lead to the transition that had us transitioned on like 9 or 10 times in my memory from last season.
Yeah, didn't Bergvall though get picked, a few times where he just bad touch and then he just let the ball, get stolen off of him, and then it just led to
last year that happened.
But listen, I'm not in any way saying that Bergvall's perfect, but Bergvall's obviously got a lot of room to grow. I'm just saying, for me, Bergvall stood out last year in his tenacity. Different type of player. I don't remember Pape Sarr going into physical duels and coming out and bossing people and doing his best to win the ball back in that. What I think of as in Pape Sarr's, like, in the excellence category is his ability to see what someone's going to do, where they're going to pass it, and intercept it, because he's got that sort of languid, lanky range on his legs where he can just like catch people off guard, intercept the ball, and go again. He did it in the final against Manchester United. He did it in the semi-final against Frankfurt. He did it, believe it or not, in the quarterfinal against Bodo. He also did it in the Carabao Cup in the last 16. And in the against Manchester United in I think it was the quarterfinal or the round before that. He did it against City in the quarterfinal in the fourth round after Coventry. What I think of when I see Pape Sarr is moments where he spots an opportunity when a ball's getting passed and the opposition think it's a clear spot, and he's just got that ability to see it, read it, and get there and cover the ground and go. Then he goes with the ball, carries the ball forward. And it's in those moments where I think that when he's done so well, then he just picks the bad option, overhits it, underhits it, or whatever else. I'm not in any way saying I don't love the player, and I'm not in any way comparing him to Bergvall and saying that Bergvall's finished and he's unfinished. They've both got their own various areas for improvement. But for me, Pape Sarr just needs to improve in that regard.
Look, I hear what you're saying, and I do think there are areas where Pape Sarr needs to improve. But I do think his gets highlighted a lot more, and Lucas Bergvall's gets forgiven a lot more. There's 3 or 4 times Bergvall was caught in possession, and that ball ended up in the back of our own net off the back of it. But he's almost given a free pass to a certain degree. It's like if we're going to pull Pape Sarr out about it, well, then don't ignore Bergvall being caught for it as well.
Could you make the case that Sarr's first season under Ange was better than Bergvall's, first season under Ange? Because Sarr, I thought maybe had a better first season under Ange's first season. I think Sarr was probably one of the best midfielders in the team. And then Bergvall in the second season, which would have been his first season with Ange, he stood out amongst a pretty bad, just sort of bunch, that year in general. But Sam, I cut you off though. Sorry.
Well, I'll answer your question. I actually, maybe my recollection is different. I thought that Sarr had a really good start to Ange's first season. And then once he went to AFCON and came back, and look, don't get me wrong, I'm not cussing him out for struggling, in my opinion, to find consistent form after AFCON. But I felt like after AFCON until quite a decent chunk into the season, I was thinking, wow, like I've really had massive hopes for Sarr, but suddenly he's he's showing kind of this consistency. I look at Sarr and I think that one player that he kind of reminds me of in moments and potentially could get to that sort of level is like a Ramirez for Chelsea, in terms of like, I don't remember Ramirez having unbelievable passing range, but what I do remember about Ramirez is he had an incredible engine. He was strong.
A great shot.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to say. And he wasn't a prolific goal scorer, but he would pop up in important moments and get a goal. And that's kind of how I see Sarr, and how he should be kind of like morphed, in my opinion, to be kind of like an attacking defensive mid, whereas you have your traditional six next, and he's next to him being more of that like box to box, as we mentioned before, getting forward, but also helping out the defensive mid, but being
Could he be like an N'Golo Kante, just to pick up off of Sam's comment there? Does he have a bit of that in him? You know, the guy that just sort of is everywhere, runs about, can't play a bit deeper, but just sort of box-to-box destroyer that can pop up with a goal or two. I think N'Golo Kante was a bit like that.
Yeah, look, look, don't get me wrong. I do think you could shoehorn Sarr into that sort of defensive midfielder, get him to mop up playing, get him to spray balls forward. But you know, I think you're limiting. I think Sam makes a great point. You know, he's got a good shot on him. He's got a good effort. He can score goals. You know, for me, I do think he's more that traditional box-to-box midfielder, you know.
And I'm not saying he would be N'Golo Kante. I'm just saying similar play style before people get on me. Alpesh Patel. Artist T, though, saying, facts, Sean, we've never done good in cups when league results were good. When we go far in cups, the league performances started to decline. This is just the case under Levy. Most players just care about winning trophies no matter what. Only money and business-minded people care about league positions. For me, it was the performances themselves that got us there to that final.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say that when we got to the Champions League final, we finished 4th in the league. So, not sure that's entirely accurate. When we got to the Europa League final in 2012 and we lost on penalties, I think that year we finished 5th in the league, which was abnormal for us at the time. I'm pretty sure that's right. I might be wrong. I don't think that that's necessarily true at all. Under Jose Mourinho, we got to the Carabao Cup final and we finished. Where did we finish in that year? Was it 5th?
7th or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, we like narrowly squeaked into the Europa League or something, I think, right? On the final day under
Yeah,
Mason.
I think. Look, my point when I was talking about the draw of or the requirement of, or the consideration rather, of players when we finished 17th. The point I was making wasn't necessarily about that. I know the question was about something else, but like if Tottenham want to kick on and go and do everything on every level, you need to be able to attract the best players that you can go after to get that. Knowing where Tottenham are in that continual kind of cyclical nature of we're knocking on the door with a team that's knocked on the big 5 to the point where we're considered a big 6, which has gone against us being kind of pigeonholed in and amongst the best teams when we're not anything like as successful as those guys. My point is that when you finish 17th and the Europa League gets you into the Champions League, but as a one-off, when the media spin that narrative that you're lucky to be in it, you don't deserve to be in it, the 17th is reality, even though it isn't the reality. It's if the Champions League is the luck, actually, it's more that the sort of the anomaly, the exception to the rule is the fact that we finished as low as we did. But the media has spun it in that way. But my point being that if you want to go and try to recorrect the course, you need to be able to go and get the best players. And the best players are listening to the media like we all do in life. Every human listens to the media because there's some sort of assumed authority attached to it, even though it's absolute bollocks. But in reality, if you're trying to get to the point where you can compete on both fronts, where you can you can do better in the Champions League, you can get to the final of the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup, and you can also do well in the in the Premier League, then you need to improve on your squad levels. But some of those players that you're looking for that achieve that well, those people are also wanted by the teams that are doing better in the league and that are always part of that big five. So if you're having to fight against the reality of the situation and the false reality, the false economy that the media are spinning because that's what they do, then it becomes a difficult square to circle when you also have to fight against Daniel Levy's lack of willingness to pay top wages. So all of those things are fighting against the ability to improve the squad, is the point I was making.
Fair. Well, there you are, Artist T. Let us know what your thoughts on that count. What players did we attract after making the UEFA Champions League final?
Tanguy and Ndombele, Gio Lo Celso. We went pretty big, and some players after
big.
that. We tried to. It didn't work out well. But those were highly sought after players. And Ndombele was highly sought after. Gio Lo Celso was highly sought after. We didn't go as big as I think some of us would have wanted, but we did attract relatively talented players that a lot of people
I don't think we
after.
signed that name that people maybe were expecting, you know what I mean? But
that's true.
At the end of the day, apparently we beat Man City, Bayern Munich and other teams to end Ndombele. But I always make the case, did they know about what did they find out that we didn't, about him, and that why we end up getting stuck paid such a massive fee and huge wages on the guy. But look, actually, I get what you're saying. For me, look, I think ambition and the money has to be right now in modern day football for these top players. Most of them will want to go where they have the best chance of winning the trophies. But also, if there's two clubs of the same sort of stature going for them, the one that's willing to pay them the most money wins. I think at Tottenham's, what one of Tottenham's biggest problems is in our contract offers, we try to put a lot of clauses in there. If you reach this, if you reach that, sort of know we're never really going to reach that level for them to sort of get par on wages with what a lot of other players maybe at their level are on at other clubs and stuff like that. So that's also a bit of a hindrance. But look, anyway, Shawnee, what's coming up on your channel over the next few days, my man?
But before I give you that answer, I want to ask you guys a question. There was a comment there from Adam Phillips saying the flat cap era is over. And it's actually he's true. Like, Jack, you're not wearing yours. Dave, you're not wearing yours. And I'm wearing a baseball cap. What's going on?
I don't know if it's over. I think it's just in the summer, it feels like, I got to try to stay as cool as possible. And also at one point I was losing my hair. And so I felt like, the flat cap was starting to contribute to it. So that might be the real reason, Adam Phillip, if I'm going to be as honest with you as possible. But I think I wear it on all game days. I think I've stayed very consistent on wearing it during most game days, unless maybe a couple here and there where I probably just forgot it or couldn't find it. But I've kind of tried to honor it more for special occasions, maybe the flat caps for the special occasions, not just trying to use it on just any old show. And then, while I'm young, I'll just show off whatever hair I have left.
I love that, mate. No, I feel like my excuse, I've just been bullied out of it. People are saying, Sean, get rid of the flat cap. Get rid of the flat cap. So
I lost mine. I lost mine at the Palace game, found it again, and then re-lost it. So, and I'll be honest, I'm struggling to find one that suits me again, so they're a rarity. So I'm not just going to put on any old flat cap. It's got to be the right one, the right shade, the right color. Like, I'm experimenting with trying grays, blues, greens, but honestly, it's only really a black one that really sort of suits me. So, until I find the right one that's comfortable as well, you're going to see me looking like this. But many people saying I'm looking good lately. I'm having a glow.
You are looking good, Dave.
Trade-off, my man. Can't be a bad trade-off, Adam.
I love that you said I need one that suits me. It's like you're finding like a puppy or like a cat. Sort of 100%. Like it's like it's like the Golden Compass, or that book, of like I need to find the right demon, to match.
Like I do have other flat caps. They just don't. They're not for streaming. They're not suited for streaming. They're more for suits, or do you know what I mean?
I can't buy just any old flat cap. I like that.
I think that we should create a merch brand. A Spurs flat cap merch brand. I think we could be selling it on my channel, your channel. We can make a little bit of a.
I think we're missing a beat here. I think we are. Good beats. You can get one with hair attached to it, maybe a mustache as well. Good beats, and also some people are still missing the days of the swim cap that I was using for a couple of shows. That was actually because I think I was just battling a fever, for like a week or two, and I just needed more than just the flat cap. I needed something to actually keep me warm. But seems like there's still divide over that. Maybe one day we'll have a panel show over swim cap versus a flat cap, and it'll finally be decided.
Well, we've nothing to do at the minute. There's no transfers happening. So we might do a flat cap ranking
straight
stream.
To the barrel constantly. Yeah.
Might do a flat cap ranking stream. Get the different types of flat caps and rank them.
A cap is for life, not for Xmas, says Alan M. I love that. The cap is for life.
Right. Well,
Thanks
look,
to
let's
everybody,
not
though.
waste
Thanks to
everybody's
everybody
time.
for following along this stream.
Yeah.
Again, smash the like button as we're wrapping up. We'll also get to the members' comments, but it's time to thank Sean as well as Sam. Sean, what's coming up on Spurs Talk Show, Football Link? Those are the two that I put in the chat.
Yeah,
there.
thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it as always. What's coming up? I think I'm done on Spurs Talk Show. There's an outside chance that Football Link might have another show later on tonight. If not, then tomorrow we do daily shows on Football Link, talking about all things football, whatever's going on in the world of football, and then Spurs Talk Show. Look, there's not a lot going on, but that doesn't stop me from spinning a yarn and creating a random nonsense story or two that I'll spin into a 20-minute segment or a live stream. So you can find me over on Spurs Talk Show. Jack, Dave, thank you so much for having me. Sam, great to spend the time. Share the screen with you as always, mate.
I appreciate it with your time because I know you're flat out with 2 channels now. So the fact that you can still make an hour here on the Tuesday to come in, I really do appreciate that, lad.
I love it, buddy. I love sharing the thing with you guys.
So thanks, guys. I mean, I don't mean to insult him here, but obviously everyone knows who he is. But there might be that one person. If you don't, get over, check out Spurs Talk Show and Football Link, and he'll keep you up to date on all the latest transfer news, views, and clues, as he likes to call them. So
however much of a barrel scraping link it is to get it out to you.
We're all barrel scraping that now.
Some people are just craving anything at this moment in time, Sean,
Our nails are bleeding.
For something.
Yeah, our fingers are bleeding from all the scraping. Sam, thanks, please plug your Twitter as well, or just any final words that you might have.
Yeah, I mean, Sean just said he occasionally, makes up and does a 20-minute video on a potential link that he would like to see. I thought that was just what reporting during the transfer window was. Because every day you see about 50 stories that just aren't true, that one random account tweets out with like 10 followers, and then bigger accounts start to do it, and it all snowballs until eventually you've got you having to get David Ornstein to be like, oh, I didn't say that, and please stop misquoting me and stuff like that. So, I don't think you're in terrible company, Sean. If that is your game.
My game is I like to play Football Manager occasionally, and whatever's there, I'll just
just even to Sam's point though. Like I was actually getting ready, and I was like, oh, do I have to do a scout report for Esteve, the Burnley player? But then all of a sudden, 30 minutes ago, Fabrizio Romano is saying that Spurs are currently focused on different targets at this stage than Maxine Esteve. So I mean, Sam is absolutely right. 1 or 2 journalists put into the void, Spurs are, narrowing it down on Esteve. And then Fabrizio Romano comes out and says the complete opposite, that, they're not even focused on him at all. And this is just the madness that we have to deal with, over these summer windows. So Sam, perfect example. Exhibit A.
Sorry, Jack. Did Romano say that? Did he mention Tottenham and Esteve in the same quote?
Yeah, he said Maxine Esteve attracting interest from several clubs this summer, but no approaches or talks with Tottenham so far. Spurs are currently focused on different targets at this stage.
That is more than good enough for me to go and do a video, and I'll be doing one in about half an hour's time. So
just twist the words around, and then
keep in mind we've got about 13 centre backs queuing up at the door.
Spurs are currently not looking at Esteve at this stage. That's what you could just say. Add an extra not, then it's a double negative. Yeah, Paulo Keefe denying that they've held talks with Burnley about Maxine Esteve. But it's funny, but then the journalists before that, some people would absolutely pounce on. I think they're not. I think one of them was like a Daily, Wire, some type of person, that plenty of us have used before. So just sorry to cut across you, Sam, but Exhibit A, it's just happened today of just the constant back and forths of what's actually happening.
Maybe I was cynical because when Sean started saying about did he mention Esteve and Tottenham in the same sentence, I was thinking you were going to say that's like prime, clickbaiting. People are looking up Esteve. It's like trending. Esteve and Spurs are trending,
No, what I would do is I'll put out a video saying, listen, there's rumors out about this. For what it's worth, Romano has said this is not really real, but just on the off chance that he's wrong, here's the scout report on Esteve, and this is my thoughts on Esteve. And that people, it's not necessarily a bad piece of content because you never know what's going to come around. But even if he doesn't come to Tottenham, you might want to know what he's like as a player because if he doesn't come to Tottenham, he's still going to be in the Premier League next year. So there's value in the content regardless, is how I think of it.
Do you think about the Roman
look,
Empire or Maxine Esteve more often when you go to bed? You know, plenty of people think about Maxine Esteve. Sorry, Sam.
Love that, Jack.
I was
Love
just gonna
that.
say. I mean, I'm not criticizing Sean. I mean, me and my brother will eat that up the second you post it. So don't worry about that. You'll have a couple likes in the back. But yeah, other than trying to decipher which one of Sean's transfer links are real, I would just be on Twitter occasionally having arguments about the use of British slang, and other players and whether I think Sonny should stay and whatever. So if you're just interested in general riffraff from someone you like listening to, then follow me over. Otherwise, thanks for having me on, everyone. Pleasure, Sean, as always.
Thanks for your
Sam.
regular contributions, Sam. You've been very, very good to us, very loyal to us, and we do appreciate it. One of my favorite parts of the show was Sean playing bingo with all the attacking players that we have. He had to name about 10 or 12 and then felt like he was still missing one or two. It's like
I knew I was missing one, Jack, and it was Solomon. After I handed back the mic, if you like, I was like, who was I was like, and then someone said in the comments, what about Solomon? I was like, that's the guy I never mentioned. So there's 12 in the squad, if you include Kudos and also and then someone else, if you include forwards as well. So we got too many, mate. You know,
yeah, those are the Spurs trivia questions that I enjoy. Name all 12 attackers that Spurs fans don't even know anymore. Artist T saying, with how Sean speaks, I'm betting his football manager team gets relegated a lot. My FIFA team create a club would absolutely destroy his. Well, challenge accepted, Sean.
Challenge accepted, my man. I'll take you on FIFA or I'll take you on FM. I used to work for Sega, by the way. 10 years ago, I finished my university summers. I'd come home and I would drive out to Brentford rather every day, and there was the Sega building, and I used to be asked to take on teams. I used to be asked to take on, for example, take Como, and you have it was the FM situation. It would take Como, and you have to win. The challenge for my day was to take Como to win back-to-back promotions, or get them relegated, then get them promoted, then win the Europa League or whatever, or the Carabao Cup, or so, whatever it was, some random process. And the only time I'd have to reset it was if I'd lost in the final on penalties. So I'm more than capable of manipulating the algorithm and the spreadsheets that work in FM. I can handle that. And in terms of FIFA, I don't know your standard, but I'm confident enough to throw a flat cap on the outcome. So let's.
Are you on PlayStation or Xbox, Sean?
I'll take on any. It doesn't matter. Multi-platform.
Yeah, he's got multiple systems. He can play multiple systems. Multifaceted, multi-tactics.
All right, you might have to get a cooking, Sean, at some point.
Yeah, Sam is quite good. Accidentally skipped this. Big up to you, Dan Coys. Nearly there at the 40-month club. Absolutely crazy how many of you guys are in that stage of longevity with us. Appreciate you, Dan. Hopefully you're doing okay and enjoying your Hotspur summer. Big up, Dave and Jack. Come on, you Harris Army. It's also interesting, Dan, maybe you can give us your feedback if you're still listening. DB enjoys the no-cap army by the looks of things. He's actually preferring that at the minute. And big up to Dermatron as well, saying big up, guys. Great work back in the hospital again. Everybody do think of Dermatron. Hopefully he's out. Speedy recovery and is back out, with us soon. We need our favorite of all the ITKs. Dermatron is certainly my favorite. Big up to the Tron. And earlier in the back end, by the way, Dermatron, we had a mention of you because Sam's microphone was acting a bit funny, and it sounded like a Dermatron microphone. Big up to you, sir. And hopefully you have a speedy recovery. Artist T saying he's on Xbox. But yeah, boys. I mean, welcome to stick with us if you would like to for the members section. But I'm just pulling that up now. And thanks again for your contributions to the show this week. And hopefully next week we'll have more kudos type of stuff to talk about, or we're just days away from the first preseason games, which I'm sure plenty of us are just, kind of itching for at this moment. We've been waiting for a while now with the lack of transfer news, but next week we'll just be days away from the first preseason games.
I might be going to the Reading game. Can't wait for that. Thank you so much, Jack. Appreciate you, mate. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Sam. Sam, you might be able to cook me. Apparently, someone in the comments said you're busy on the old FIFA. But
yeah, bring that up, Jack. Put that on. Play like an outro for me. Play that on the screen while I leave. It's Sean's comment.
What are we doing here? I'll let you go. Thanks, guys. Have a good time.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
See
Sean.
you later,
Appreciate
lads.
it,
You got,
sir.
lads.
Have a good one.
Be easy. Well
Thanks,
played,
Sam.
chat.
And we'll get to some of the members' comments here. Thank you, guys. By the way, in case you are a member, this is a perk that we like to give you guys. You guys do a lot, especially over the summer when there's not a whole lot going on sometimes, and we're desperate for, any sort of, things to talk about, during the summer. You guys help out, during these panel shows, and it's just an extra perk that we try to give to you guys in case you weren't aware. If you are a member, look out for these posts on the YouTube profile or on the YouTube page. Just look out for them, and you can give us your questions for the end of the show. Sean Maddox saying, how do you want Frank to line up the team? How do you expect him to line up the team? Starting 11 and formation. Dave, would you prefer the back three, back four? That's probably a good place to get started.
I prefer a back four, Jacko, to be honest with you. I think back threes, I think technically they're actually a back five. I think they're more defensive. It's a very rare occasion you see an attacking variant of it. So for me, I think I would prefer the back four, to be honest with you.
And then if you had a back four, could you quickly name, a version of it, your best 11 at the minute?
Yeah, Vicario on goals, Romero, Van de Ven at centre back, Porro at right back, Godogi at left back, Bentancur and CDM, along with Papa Matasar and Madison in midfield, Sonny off the left, Johnson or Kulusevski off the right, and Solanke through the middle.
Oh, had a slip in there with that Johnson. Looks like competition there on the right side there, Shawnee. Q7 saying, hello, lads. Why is it as soon as a player may be coming to Spurs, he all of a sudden isn't good enough? Don't get me wrong. I want Eze over Kudus, but he's better than any wide player we have. Also, do you think it's fair that some of the fan base will judge Frank if he wins nothing, quickly forgetting that we had to wait 17 years, lol, for a trophy? Trophies aren't going to start flooding in with Levy in charge, as he won't do what's needed. I don't care what his buddy Vinay says. Ange took extreme measures to make it happen with a basic squad, and it cost him his job. Some good questions in there from Q7, but as well as I think just general sort of statements, made by him, his own kind of opinion. So
yeah,
really do appreciate it, Q7. I'll kind of get it started off with the first question, which was, like when we get linked with a player, all of a sudden, we all have these like really, kind of gut reaction, kind of feelings, oh, he's not actually good enough or whatever. Whereas maybe before the rumors, would a lot of Spurs fans have complimented someone like a Kudu saying, oh, I wish we had a guy like that. I kind of get where he's coming from to an extent. I think we've tried to frame the conversations, when we've had these conversations about Kudus, we kind of said, is he a little bit of a step below in terms of quality than as a perhaps Semenyo and maybe some of the others that we've looked at? I think we've had, general conversations about it. But from my recollection of the past couple of weeks while we've been talking about it, I'm pretty sure Dave is pretty excited or is, content with the idea or the prospect of signing Kudus. I think I've been as well. I've given a lot of good reasons for why I'd be excited by the Kudus signing. So I can't necessarily speak for others, but I do know what you mean by all of a sudden when we are actually linked with a player, then maybe our preferences or our palate, whatever the right word is, all of a sudden gets a lot higher, but before we're linked with them, plenty of people would have complimented, a guy like Kudus. But I don't think that's been us. I think actually for the most part, we've been pretty complimentary. We've just framed it in the sense of, is Eze maybe just that little bit better? And I think we have said that like you did there, Q7, but I don't think Dave and I have said no to Kudus at any point.
Nah, Kudus is a player I really like. I think he's a player that we need. Someone that can get on the ball, break the lines, do the unpredictable, that sort of maverick that we miss in the team. I think last year we were very robotic. We don't have that guy who can just get on the ball and go and take players on and produce something out of nothing. And I think, Kudus gives you that.
Yeah. And then on to his second question. Do you think it's fair that some of the fan base will judge Frank if he wins nothing, quickly forgetting that we had to wait 17 years? Here's my thing, just Q7. I just find it, and it's just a quick little rant. I do find it interesting that people were so quick to kind of, have really high expectations for Ange Postecoglou in his second season. And then all of a sudden now that Thomas Frank has been hired, it's all about stability, and these type of things, these sort of buzzwords. I feel like Thomas Frank, in a way, has been kind of set up to have to succeed at just my belief, from the outside looking in. If you had given Ange Postecoglou that third season, let him sort of screw it up himself, let him, kind of continue on that really poor form into next season. And let's say then we hire Thomas Frank or someone like a Thomas Frank, let's just say, halfway through the season, I think then you could use the word, stability, et cetera, because you gave Ange that third opportunity. He ends up not taking it. He doesn't end up making anything any better. And then you do have to bring someone in to steady the ship, to just sort of finish as strongly as you can for the rest of the season. Kind of what Ruben Amorim has been entrusted to do after Eric Ten Hag, was given the sack. But the fact that they did hire Thomas Frank after Ange won that trophy, I feel like you're kind of saying, to Thomas Frank, we think you would do a better job straight away with the squad than what Ange Postecoglou has done. We think that you should be able to push for a trophy as well as, finish higher up in the league. I think they've almost in a sense put on more pressure on Thomas Frank by bringing him in right after sacking Ange before being given Ange that chance in the third season. I've said this to Dave behind closed doors. I understand what you're trying to bring up, but I do feel like, if we have to be fair, I think Thomas Frank does have to finish relatively high up in the league. And I think he does kind of have to sort of, push for a trophy of some kind within a season or two. Because Ange was given those expectations and we didn't give him that third opportunity to screw it up.
Every manager is given that expectation that walks through the door. It shouldn't be any different for Frank. If he's as good as people made him out to be, and if it's a coach we needed, well then back it. Stand by. Put the expectations, put the pressure on him.
Yeah. But yeah, just saying that. I just think Thomas Frank is actually being put under a bit of pressure just by clearly if they feel like he can do a better job than Ange Postecoglou straight away, then he's not being brought in to steady the ship or anything. He's almost being brought in to push on, from the achievements of last season. And I think the rest were just very good points. About just sort of how difficult it is to win a trophy in general at Spurs because of Daniel Levy, and he's saying that Ange, took the most extreme measures in order to finally get that trophy, off of our back.
Yeah.
So great questions and also just great, opinions towards the end. Q7, really do appreciate it. Artist T, I'm trying to refresh.
They're not showing up. I've refreshed as well.
So yeah, I don't know what to say, Artist T. If you're still listening, maybe you could put them. Like you're seeing me, man. You're seeing me doing it in real time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to refresh.
We'll get them again. They're not showing up.
Just leave them for next time, then, Artist T. We're doing this show on a regular basis, and if something happens between now and Thursday, we could maybe leave a section as well for Thursday. But you're seeing, if you can tell, I am refreshing the page, and Dave said he's refreshing it and not seeing it as well.
Don't know why that's happening.
I can just very quickly do it one more time, where I just go back into the page.
I've already done that as well, and it didn't show. It says 3 comments, but it's not showing the comment for some reason.
Yeah, there they are.
In.
I had to just go back out and then go back in all the way through. Unfortunately, if Chelsea hijack Kudus, I don't think we're going to bring anyone in. What are your thoughts on this? At the end of the day, we've had this question, I think, before from you, Artist T. I think they are going to bring someone in. They are going to try to make one big signing. They always end up making one big signing. What I think is we get one big signing or we get no one. What do you think? I think that's my answer, is that we do end up getting one big signing. Whether we get two is up for debate. I'm not sure if we will, but we always do end up signing one marquee player.
Jack, that's from 7 days ago.
Oh.
They're last week's.
Sorry.
I still don't see it underneath the new one.
Sorry. Thanks for pointing that out, Dave. Yeah, I don't see it.
No, it's not. It's not showing up, RST, for some reason.
I was going to say, that's why I was like, wait, I feel like I was answering that question before.
Well, if they show up later on, we'll get them again, man.
Yeah, we'll get them next time.
They're not showing up for some reason. Usually, last time you done that, it showed up, but they're not showing up for some reason.
But thanks to everybody for being here with us. Thanks for the support, by the way, Artist T. Thank you for the comments and for the back and forth with you and Shawnee. Thanks to Dan Coys for celebrating 40 months. Thank you to Silver Surfer, Spilver Spurfer for the support. Shawnee Maddox, Mr. Pox Office, Shemi 10, K32. Eddie, your question, we spend a whole amount of time on in terms of the clean slate. Also with Sean's question about giving people a third chance, kind of a version of a clean slate. I think we spent a lot of time on that. So hopefully you guys were well and satisfied. And we'll see you for whatever comes next. Hopefully some actual business, and next week. Apparently Spurs could be trying to get the Kudus done. Kudus deal done by the end of this week. So hopefully we have that to look forward to. And then next week is the start of the preseason. So things will start heating up. Appreciate you all. And we'll see you next time. Come on, you Spurs. Smash the like button on your way out. Thanks for all the support today, everybody. And soon the flat caps will be back on. We'll see you next time, everybody.
See you soon.